do I want to compete with like people spending their life originating a sport? Probably not, when I can basically just cheat and get the same bets that they're getting and go down that route.
Come on, let's go!
Welcome to Circles Off, episode number 157, right here, part of the Hammer Betting Network and presented by Pinnacle Sportsbook. Now, we have a great interview today. No beating around the bush. Not going to have any banter off the start here because this is a great guest that I've been looking forward to for a while, relatively unknown in the space. I think is going to deliver some very good points, talking points that we can discuss in the future and going to give a lot of insight to sports bettors out there. But before we do, if you haven't checked out Pinnacle Sportsbook, I highly recommend that you do so. Proud sponsor here of the Circles Off podcast. Pinnacle is where the sharpest bettors play. They've been in business for the last 25 years, and honestly, it's a very good sportsbook experience. There's all this talk recently about limiting sharp bettors and things of that nature. Well, if you are a sharp bettor, you're not going to get limited at Pinnacle Sportsbook. The odds and the max risk posted for everyone to see. No funny business happening there. Also, if you just want an account for Pinnacle for real-time odds so you can arb against other books, totally easy. You can sign up for an account at Pinnacle, get those real-time odds. If you do so, use code HAMMER to do so. It does support us here on Circles Off. You must be 19 plus, not available in the US. And as always, please play responsibly. Before we get into our interview, I want to ask one more quick thing from you. Give us a pre-like and a pre-sub. Don't ask for it all that often, but it's the road to 10K here on Circles Off. We want to get the subscriber base up. There's still about 60% of you watching every single video out there that are not subscribed to this channel. And you're watching a lot of the video, 20 plus minutes, a lot of the time. So just smash that subscribe button down below, set notifications. You'll get notified every time we put out a new episode here of Circles Off. And make sure you do smash that like button down below as well. Our guest this week here on Circles Off is a sports bettor, a poker player, and a software engineer. He was recommended to us on Circles Off by the infamous NFL Pinnacle beater. You can follow him on Twitter at FlupNoLied. We'll put that down in the description below for you to click. Chris Dierkes joins us here on Circles Off. Chris, how's it going?
Yeah. Hey guys, nice to meet you.
Yeah, you as well.
Chris, first off, where are you calling in from?
New York City.
Oh, a New Yorker. Nice to have you on. I appreciate the time. I know you have a super interesting story. We've chatted a bit beforehand. I think everyone's going to love this episode. I know I'm looking forward to it. We'll start it off. Your background, how'd you get into sports betting? And then kind of the whole story, like what are you doing right now?
Yeah, sure. So I started more of a degenerate path. My family is very big gamblers. No one has like made a living doing it and whatnot. And so I've always been attracted to gambling. And I played this video game called RuneScape. I don't know if anyone has heard that.
Yeah.
And you can gamble in the game. And I got a little bit of addiction to gambling at that point, and it slowly progressed to online poker. I was able to make money playing RuneScape, and then I would lose it on the poker site, and just repeat that process for about 2 to 3 years until I became good enough to actually win at poker. And through studying and whatnot, I started realizing you could actually make some real money gambling. And from that point on, I played poker in college, played at home games, and that's really my start of my gambling career. I didn't really get into sports betting not to a few years after that.
I don't want to directly outright ask you your age. It's nobody's business, but you do look younger than me, and I grew up in the moneymaker boom. Is it fair to say that you were like the next generation of poker after that?
I don't mind. I'm 25. I don't really care.
It's just interesting because, like, and again, not to paint everyone into the same picture. Most 25-year-olds I know, and I do know a lot of them, they're not into poker. Zach is 25 years old. Johnny held the poker game very recently with some 25-year-olds who had no idea what they were doing playing poker as well. So I'm just curious, like, where did the poker fascination come from?
It's just like, it's part of the gambling. I just really love the thrill of it all. And honestly, I think a lot of sports bettors disagree with this, but I think poker and sports are extremely similar. Like, like an example I would use is like if you want to make a lot of money playing poker, there's like two ways in cash. One is just be the best. So I would equate that to sports is just be the best originator. Like be NFL at post, NBA at post. Like I mean, you're just gonna make infinite. And if it's same with poker, if you're just the best player, you can play the highest stakes games, you can crush everyone. Another way is just get into the softest games. And it was similar to sports. If you just get the softest outs, you can crush that way. So it's very, very similar. And with poker, I just went down the route of getting the softest game. So I would hunt for like live games that were very soft, try to get into like private games that are with couple of big players and whatnot. That's where I went down.
Did you do anything in an online capacity in poker? And like, did you leverage any tools out there to find weaker games online?
Online is so much tougher than in per. It's like it's night and day. For anyone that doesn't know much about poker, I, I would say I could roughly beat about 50 cent $1 online, and that is not that high stakes. That's like you're not making a good living doing that. In person, like at a casino, like $10, $25 cash, no problem. It's just like it's unbelievable. So I never really tried that much online. I did use online tools like Solver. I'm sure you guys have heard of that
Yeah.
to like study and whatnot. But most of it was me trying to befriend whales at the game, get into the good games. That's really what I try to do.
Cool.
Don't have to be the best. You just have to be the best at the table.
Exactly, exactly.
You got that. You took that right from Rounders, no?
Did I?
I'm pretty sure that it came up in round. I haven't seen Rounders in a decade now.
So you transitioned now into sports betting. How did that come to be?
Yeah, so NFL Pinnacle beater was a friend of mine. Uh, he was just mentioning like the site Pinnacle, that you could like it was much better than other sports books. And at the time, I thought like only the smartest, sickest humans could beat sports. Like they just have to have all this knowledge. And then I like look and I'm like looking at advertisements for like sign up to my betting service or whatnot, and I thought they were all scammy. And then I found an advertisement for like Odds Jam, and I was like, okay, let me try this. It's using Pinnacle. It's got to be, and I know Pinnacle is good based on what Penny Beater had said. So it's got to have something there. And I signed up for it, and it worked. Like it was the first time. Like it's like unbelievable. Their advertising is so sketchy nowadays, but like back then, a couple years ago, it just worked. Like it was just easy money. Like of course your counts get limited, but it was literally as simple as like click a button and make money. I mean, it was unbelievable.
Well,
Still is.
yeah.
Yeah.
Not odds jam per se, but
Yeah,
a couple of things.
That
we
method
work
of
on.
betting, obviously.
Yeah,
Yeah.
depends where and stuff like that, obviously, as you mentioned. But
Just curious, what was the marketing hook to you back in the day to get you on board with a service like that, if you recall? Like obviously there was probably some promises of winning, but if you had come across a lot of the scam services, what was it that made you go down the path of using a service like OddsJam?
Yeah, I think it was like the data driven. I was like it wasn't promising picks. It was like data analysis based on these things. And part of the thing I like about OddsJam, at the time I did. I don't use it anymore. But at the time I liked it is they give you a lot of picks, but you actually have to decipher what's good and what's bad. And that's something like I like did myself. I did some work on myself to figure out which of the plays that they show, because everything is basically just like, is it an arb to penny? If it is, like display it. But not everything that's an arb to penny is just like something you should bet. So you have to decide what not to bet and what to bet, and that process for me was very fun to learn.
Yeah, and also penny's not necessarily like the North Star in every market either, which I think a lot of people get confused by.
Exactly, and like at the beginning, I was betting like player props, and it's just like then I find out that like FanDuel's taking like 5x limits on like penny, and I'm like, well, maybe FanDuel's number is a little bit better than pennies. Or I'm not saying it is, but if the limits are so small, there's probably a reason behind it.
Did you continue using the service until you got limited at all your outs, or did you branch out and just like start doing your own top down betting where you're like, I don't actually need to follow a service anymore?
Kind of both. So like one of the first things I did for like top down betting was uh, Sportsbook Review. It's a great site to get some like historical odds and whatnot. I used to just scrape like the past 10 years of like NBA totals for like depending on open and close. And what I found is if you bet the close, it's like 50-50 if you go over or under. Like if you just bet only overs or only unders, it's 50% even, like which would make sense. I mean, the close is very efficient. But if like it opens 200 and it closes like 201 and you bet over 201, for example, or if it opens 200 and it goes to 199 and you bet under 199, you would actually win at 51.1%. Now, for most people listening, I'm assuming that's pretty intuitive why. Like you bet with the steam. I mean, but for me at the time, this is like I realized the power of steam. Like
Right.
if someone's betting and someone's moving the line, they know something that you don't know. And like just realizing a lot of like little things like that was why I thought like top down was like the best way for me to go. Like, do I want to compete with like people spending their life originating a sport? Probably not. When I can basically just cheat and get the same bets that they're getting and go down that route.
If you don't mind sharing, and it's a very personal question, but I'm not scared to ask the personal questions. Top down, using another service in the start, just getting started in sports betting. Roughly, how much were you able to make with that?
Honestly, I don't really mind answering that question because it kind of leads into something else, it's funny. It, Before I was about to get end limited, this is when I was like limited with DraftKings, FanDuel, everything. It was right around 50,000. And I thought this was the end of like sports betting. Like I thought once you're limited, it's donezo, like that's it. And I had points bet left, and I was just like, and at this time I was like starting to like really get into the NFL, originate, and I was like, there was a play I really liked. It was like the Eagles plus 9.5 at Tampa Bay in the playoffs 2 years ago. This was like when Tom Brady was still there,
I did that
and
that line close like seven or seven
seven
and a half.
seven and a half, seven and a
Okay,
half.
okay,
So I got the CLV, so it was a good bet. And I decided to just jam it in 45,000. Basically all in of all my profits that I made from like odd sham and whatnot. Just jam it in. I just go big or go home.
how many months of profits was that? Just out of
About about 3 or 4.
okay, 3 or 4 months of profit. You've decided that you were just going to jam it in on one bet.
Yeah, and to be fair, like I still had poker on the side, like that. I was still playing poker, so what? It wasn't like I'm not just jamming in like my net worth on something, but it was a significant amount of money to myself, and then of course just get smashed, just not even close.
I remember that game very clearly. It was like watching basically a Super Bowl team compete against an XFL team, if I recall that game. Like Jalen Hurts couldn't complete a forward pass
Yeah,
in that game. The Bucks went. I can't remember the final score, but yeah, that's actually such a funny story that it's just one massive bet into a book where you got really good CLV, still lost the bet, lost all of your profits. No offense that I find this funny,
no,
but
no,
like
it's fine.
lost all of your profits and you lost your last out in the
Did
process.
you lose the account?
That's the funniest part. That's like PointsBet limited me after that. Like I got limited after that. Like just I'm down like 50 or 60,000 PointsBet lifetime, and I can't get it back. I'm done.
That is brutal. That happens. That happens, but
Yeah,
that is absolutely brutal. Okay, so that's the nut low, but you
yeah.
came back up. So floor is yours. What was the come up like?
So I guess it's a little white. I still had Caesars. Like I was partially limited on Caesars, so I was still doing a little bit of Caesars, but nothing close to the volume. It was like a couple bets a day, and I would talk about sports betting because it was still interesting to me. And at the poker table one day, one guy was just like, "Hey, you can bet on my site," and I was like, I'm going to try to win, right? Like I'm going to be able to beat you, because I would just like I didn't. The guy I played with in poker, I was friendly with him. I didn't realize he was offering me to a PPH, like, and I signed up to it. I joined his site and I realized, wow, there's ways to bet other than like like just like the recreational books, and uh, that's kind of like where I realized, and then I was talking to other people that were doing sports betting. I was getting more involved with like Twitter and whatnot, and I was like, oh, there's something called bearding. Like you can have other people bet for you. Like that's potential. It's not just your own. It's not just your own accounts. And then that's really like where like the light bulb went off. Just like, oh, this is so much bigger than what I initially thought. It's not just like once you win as much from DraftKings, you're donezo. There's way more ways to make money in sports.
Yeah, it's extremely rare that somebody wins like 45K before they learn the concepts of like
Yeah.
PPH and bearding and stuff like that. Yeah, you certainly have like an unusual path to where you've gotten to. So now you are in the PPH world, getting other accounts and stuff like that. Are you continuing with top down through all of that, or do you start to figure out ways to flip that and go origination bottom up?
Yeah, a little bit of both. I tried originating some like NFL, and it is tough. Like, I know
And
Rob, you've talked.
NFL because you like NFL the most?
Yeah,
Like you, okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I know Rob, you've talked about like you can't beat like NFL day of, which is like reasonable. I can't even beat like NFL like midweek of like it's tough. Like, uh, you know, I was able to originate some numbers and pick off some like off market numbers and beat opens, but like it's openers like so how much it is. And I also tried like futures, which I found some like gems in the futures market. And but at this point, I realized like if I really want to make a lot of sports, I've got to either dive all in on originating, or I just gotta get outs. And like I went the out route. Like I'm not very sharp in like any specific sport. I know a lot of sports medium well, and that just like helps me like bet. Just like I can read the market really well, and that's kind of where I'm at now.
That's interesting. It kind of reminds me a little bit of when we had China on earlier, where he's just like, I'm not really an expert in these sports, but like I can dig
Yeah.
in. I kind of know what's of value, and I'm able to get down good bets off that.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the originating part, and we talked a little bit off air in terms of like a precursor to this meeting because Johnny's been very vocal before
Yeah.
about how he doesn't bet futures and doesn't like betting futures. And you, on the other hand, um, do bet a lot of futures, and you think that there's a good case to be made for actually betting futures. So, if you
Yeah.
could walk us through that, I think would be interested in hearing
Yeah,
that.
sure. So first, I do agree with like parts of what Johnny ha had said. Like, for example, when I was first starting out and my bankroll was much smaller, I did run into the exact problem that Johnny mentioned, where it's just like I had like half my bankroll tied up in futures. I found a banger bet that I want to bet, and oh, I can't bet it. And I was like, damn it, like this sucks. But at this point, you know, if I need more money, I just deposit more. Like it's not an issue. So for me, it's just like I could either put my money in like the stock market or like sometimes like 30-40% ROI future bets. Like I would be insane not to put it in that. Like that's the and then there's other reasons as well. Like I talked a little bit before air. It really helps with like how it looks on your account. Like I think Shipper has mentioned this, you're betting into a big vig market. It looks fishy. If you bet a team to win in like a 30% hold market, it doesn't look good on your account. It looks like you're an idiot. And if it's winning, that can really help with account survival. It can help with like your outs last. But I would say if you're low on money, I would agree with Johnny. Don't bet futures and definitely don't bet them in PPH. It's like that's a recipe for disaster. But if you have a big enough bankroll and you aren't going to run out, I think you should be betting futures. There's just a lot of gems in there.
How often are edges of that size coming up for you in the futures market? Because obviously we can look at like the biggest edge in any market and be like, oh,
Yeah.
you should be betting this because you could have a 30% edge. But how, like, what is a realistic edge for you to have where you can get down on a future and you're comfortable with making that bet?
Yeah, I would say 10 to 15% is like, and I know a lot of people say, oh, 10, 15%, like get out of here. But it just, who's betting it? Like you're competing against no one. Just pull up like NFL win totals. You'll find arbs everywhere. If you just know which side is right, you're already at like a couple percentage points there. And if you have a slightly better numbers, but like the 30, 40% edges don't happen that often. Like I can actually share one that happened last year. Um, this was I think week 12. There was 5 games left for the Tennessee Titans, and their win total at the time was like 5.5, minus 110. And they played Monday night versus the Dolphins. And I already leaned their over, but then on Sunday, CJ Stroud gets injured.
Yep.
And after the Dolphins, they were going to play the Texans. Well, they just went from a 3.5 point underdog to now a 3 to 3.5 point favorite. And when the futures market reopens on Monday, same line, over 5.5, minus 110. And they just gained like zero point 0.2 wins by that like switch in equity. And like that's just an enormous edge. And because no one is betting it. And that was up, that closed at 5.5, minus 110. Like no one is betting it.
Yep. And they came back from two TDs down to the Dolphins as well and won that game. So that was,
Ironically enough,
yeah.
they beat the Dolphins and they lost the Texans. But you know, that is like,
Well, that's sports betting. I
The
mean,
money's made
yeah,
when you
of
place
course.
the bets, obviously, not
Yeah, of
not
course, of
after
course.
the results. But no, that's interesting. Listen, I've never said that there wasn't edges available in the futures market,
Yeah.
but just to kind of like reiterate, I just don't see any value right now in putting in like a season long win total for NFL right now, given that that's not going to grade until like depending on the book, could be like mid-Jan, depending on some
Yeah.
books, could be, if it grades after it completes, and maybe having over 4.5, you get lucky. Maybe you get a grading in like October or November, but you're really not getting grading for at a minimum here, like probably 9 months from this point.
yeah,
That's
totally
that's a
understand.
fair point. But another point I counter to that is the non-grading is actually a benefit in some cases. For example, like taxes, like having a count in the next year can be very beneficial if you can count the loss this year and move it to next year. Like that's a way of starting the year up.
Fair.
So if you do like start on a downswing, you could write off that losses because you can't carry them through. So that's like another reason why I like futures in that regard.
I
The
love
old
this
revenue
combo.
recognition
Tax
principle.
implications. Yeah, that's great. That's actually a very good point that I've never heard anyone bring up before.
Tax harvesting sports betting via futures. Yeah, no, I listen, that's an angle that I think is very interesting. I'm glad you mentioned it on the podcast. Now that's out there. That's awesome. Um,
You're in New York, right?
I
Is
just
that
moved here for a new job, so like that's what. But
where were you previously? Because I did you go to Virginia Tech? Is
yeah,
that
I did.
okay? Have you been in any like legalized states for a long period of time where you could
Oh
do any
yeah,
sort of in-person wagering?
yes. Actually, that's so. There was a MGM National Harbor opened up in Maryland, and they came. I played poker there. That was like where I played poker a lot, and they just got legal like 2 years ago. And when they had the kiosks open, it was a gold mine. I mean, like in person, it was like taking candy from a baby. It was insane. So I don't mind sharing these edges because they're just dust at this point. Like, good luck getting them down.
Yeah, I like that.
Um,
I love the stories now where I mean, listen, these will certain things just will exist over time and then they no longer exist and everyone's comfortable sharing them when they no longer exist because it's not
yeah,
gonna but it's still I still really enjoy these stories like the Telemachus. I always butcher
yeah.
the name. When he talked about the Super Bowl story, how they just like how Tom Peabody's just like mashing a kiosk for hours on end on a terrible line. Great, like great stuff. So I'm actually very curious to
I've
hear.
given out a couple edges on this pod that I thought were dead, that then one of them did come back and is still
Yeah.
currently active right now. I'm not going to say which one, but maybe you listen back to all 160 episodes. But no, I'm not even talking shit. There is one that I gave out that's back now. But go ahead, Chris.
That's fair. No, and if you bring up, I'm going to say his name wrong too. Tell us something. Telemachus. When he was telling the story, I was just laughing because very similar thing happened to me. So the biggest edge I got was one of my friends that I met on gambling Twitter, Clars24. I'm sure you guys have
Oh
heard of
yeah.
him or seen him.
Yeah,
He,
I've exchanged DMs with him before.
yeah,
If you can pipe into his ear that we'd love to have
yeah,
him on, because I've tried a few times. He's like, it's not a good time or whatever. But
yeah.
anyways, continue your story. Sorry.
Yeah, he messaged me. He said you should try like this was like 2 years ago when or yeah, where Ohio State I think was the 5 seed in college football, and I might be getting it wrong because I don't really follow college football that much, but they either needed to win to be like one of the final four, or they needed someone else to lose, and that was the only way. And he said you should try parlaying that happening and Ohio State winning the Natty. And I was like, okay, like it's not going to work, but I'll try it. And I tried it at like, and it just worked. And I was, oh my God, it's like you're getting like 30 to 1 on something that like is without a shadow of a doubt is like 13 to 1. And I mean, look, you can't just bet like infinite on it because, you're going to lose often, but that is something that you can just get a lot down on. And then I tried betting an NFL team to win and that same team to win the division. And that worked, which is obviously just like insanely correlated, like unbelievable edges, like 50, 100% plus edges. And I was just like pounding the kiosk, just getting as much down as I could. And then there's another edge too, where I'm just I remember it was like 1 a.m. and I just came back from a poker session. I was like, oh, let me just like check the kiosk lines. It was like Thursday night football, Niners versus Seahawks, and the Niners are like 3.5 point favorites. And team total, like Niners 19 and a half, Seahawks 22 and a half. And I'm like, well, that doesn't make any sense. Like, how are the Niners favorite? And they just flipped the wrong name. So I just emptied all the cash I had on me, $300 at a time, into the kiosk, and just like the next day, just hand it in. They pay it out. I don't get banned. I'm like, no big deal. And it was funny, like when Pamalkas was saying like he's worried about like getting banned. Like, I had like multiple of these like obvious like mistakes and just never got banned. It was incredible. They had no idea what they were doing.
Yeah, that's just some pretty bad trading. But you
Yeah,
know what? Listen, these edges do come up. Like they
yeah,
happen. Mistakes will inevitably happen. Um, in a similar vein, here in Ontario, there was a couple sports books that their same game pricing algorithm did not take into account like correlations with um, players' lines in hockey. So, you could
yeah,
bet someone to score a goal and someone to get an assist in a same game parlay where they're playing on the same line, which is obviously very highly correlated. And many, many books were pricing that correctly, but some were just absurdly off. And like that lasted for months.
Buddy,
And
prior to that, which I didn't even tell you guys, prior to that, when it first started, you could actually do even better than that. Was power play goal and power play assist for
oh,
specific guys
amazing. Yeah.
at way higher juice on a sick correlation.
But you don't know this stuff unless you try it. And honestly, I'm a huge hockey fan, and I make most of my betting income from betting hockey. I spent like a day just going through like correlations everywhere, and I'm like, this is obviously wrong. And sometimes you don't even need to be able to accurately price it. You just know intuitively, like this doesn't make any sense. How could this possibly be the price? And it's like brute forcing,
yeah.
an edge, but it exists.
It's funny you mentioned that because I was the same way when I was like getting like a lot of PPHs. Like every time I got into PPH, I would just try every correlation that I possibly could. And this is a nice PPH story I had. One day, I had this PPH. It was like 5 cent line PPH. Mostly, you could just bet like major markets. So wasn't betting it that much because I can't really beat a lot of major markets. But one day, the owner of the PPH must have like fucked something up, where he allowed me to parlay tennis sides and totals. So I was just parlaying like like Iga Swiatek -7.5 and under 17 and a half at like plus 264. It's just like the fair on that is like plus 120. Like you can't lose betting that, and like you can just crush them instantly. I mean, how could you possibly lose betting that big? And you can just win piles. And that same PPH, he ended up scumming us a little bit, but we got him for like, huge. So
Yeah, well, that's inevitably how
Listen, if you're
most
not
of
getting
yeah,
scummed on the way out, then what are
yeah,
you doing?
yeah, that's inevitably how most of the PPH stuff ends with the better winning a bunch and then not getting the last payout. But
yeah.
there's shoulder shrug. All right, I want enough off this guy. I'll deal with it. For those of you who are new here and you have no idea what we're talking about in regards to PPH, PPH stands for pay per head. It's a traditional local bookie. I mean, you would have probably encountered this at some point in the past, maybe not. But in the olden days, before regulated sports betting and even before offshore, you'd go meet up with somebody on maybe the local corner, or you'd find someone at the barber shop, whatever, would just give you a betting account. And back in the day, they used to write it into their books. Eventually, got more sophisticated, where you'd call in, and then obviously nowadays there's websites which you can bet, but it's just meeting with someone, local
To
bookie.
be clear here, we do recommend you play if you're in Canada at Pinnacle Sportsbook, and don't mess around with that stuff. A lot of issues, you don't get paid out. There's really no recourse. A lot of times it's not really fair. So, if you're looking to just sign up for a new book, like, no need to go asking around for a local. Go sign up at Pinnacle Sports. Use code Hammer, by the
You
way.
you often hear professional bettors such as Chris here talk about the PPH world because we're all looking for additional liquidity. A lot of us have either been limited or banned from certain accounts. We all would love books like Pinnacle to exist everywhere, but they don't nowadays, where you can bet more there. But eventually, lots of bettors need a bet size that might even be bigger than what the sharp sports books are offering, and they seek other spots to bet down to get down as well. But Chris, we've briefly chatted off air and exchanged some messages, but you did let me know that you're currently working as part of a smaller betting group where you would consider yourself the head trader nowadays.
Yeah.
Depending on who you talk to, head trader of a betting group can mean a variety of different things. What I would consider to be, head trader of our group might be very different from someone else. So what does a typical day look like for you? And like, what's your responsibility within the larger group?
So as head trader, my job is basically placing the bets. I have two guys that are able to get accounts from me, which is they're really good at, and my goal is just to maximize like account survival in that regard. And something that I've heard a lot about people talk about account survival is I hear like you had Mr. Limited on, and he talked about how can you keep your account up the max. I think I have a different attitude about accounts. So an example I would use is like say you have an account. It could be illegal, PPH, whatever you want to call it, and you know for a fact you can get 2,000 an EV a week for a year before you're booted, or you can get 50,000 in EV in 1 month, but then you're booted. Like, I feel like most pros would just say, "Oh, 2K a week is just the way to go. You're getting
Nah,
double."
only fake sharps would say that.
Uh,
Well, I'm agreeing with you. I'm agreeing with you.
yeah,
You're gonna say you'd rather the 50K in the 1 month.
yeah,
Of
yeah,
course.
and I think I want like time is a huge factor. Like
Yeah.
my goal is I want to burn every account I get as fast as possible while maximizing how much the max expected value is. I want to churn through accounts as fast as possible. I'm not here to survive long term. I want to get the money in good now when I know I have an edge, and that's my attitude about it.
Stellar. Stellar way to look at things, honestly. I couldn't agree more. I've always mentioned it's like people always say like, "Oh yeah, you got to make sure you're going and like making sure you never lose an account." At the end of the day, like you're gonna get limited. You're gonna get
Yeah,
limited. Like you're gonna like I'm gonna sign up at PointsBet and I'm gonna get limited at PointsBet, and it is what it is. I'll go play somewhere else, but I don't want to be like, hey, I gotta make only like $25 a week here so that I don't get limited and I could keep this account for keep my PointsBet account for 3 years. Like it doesn't matter.
I think Chris hit the nail on the head with this, which is if you prolong the account for as long as possible. And by the way, listen, there's some people who I think sports betting is everyone's entitled to their own process, right? Like I believe in certain things that I do, and they've really worked for me. And I don't believe in some other ways of betting, but to each their own. Everyone's going to figure out what works for them in some capacity. But I think where Chris hit the nail on the head here is that you don't know that your edges are going to exist forever. And when you have an account that you can bury in that moment and win like a ton of money, and you don't go for it under the premise that, hey, if I can just kind of let this go over a long period of time, that the edges do go away. Especially if you're like finding an error or mispricing, other people are going to find this stuff too, and then eventually the sportsbook becomes aware of it. So I've always, listen, I'm to each their own. I really think it depends on the account, and like a variety of things that I can't even get into because there's actually so much that I think goes into the equation. But the assumption that you have an edge that's going to exist forever, I think is where a lot of people go wrong. And they're like, I need this account because I'm making 3,000 a week off of this account. I mean, that doesn't mean that 12 weeks from now you're still making 3,000 a week. Can completely change. So I think that's a good point. Do you ever though, Chris, consider at all any sort of strategies to like? I know you just said to me like, listen, I want to hit these accounts hard. But would there ever be a situation for you where you're like, it actually might be beneficial for me to try to keep this out for as long as possible?
Yeah, so it's like it's balancing both. Like there's a happy medium. Like I'm not trying to get limited in a new account in one day. I mean, I'm trying to do it where I maximize both. And if you recall in our DMs, Rob, I'd actually asked you like, how can you like prolong an account? Like how can you like bet like negative EV to start to maximize it? And I think like doing that at the beginning could really help uh, an account like survival, whether it be legal or PPA. Just like get, looking recreational can prolong you a little bit and your net total will be higher at very low time cost.
Um, we did do the full episode with Mr. Limited.
Mr. Limited.
I do love that episode. Honestly, if you do struggle with getting limited at sportsbooks, I probably would check that out. He's a pretty knowledgeable guy. But I'm going to ask you, Chris, are there any concepts or ideas? And I know you're a Circles Off fan. You've told me that before. On how to get more down at potentially recreational books that we may not have covered here on Circles Off before.
I'm not sure how much you've covered this, but I'll say it anyway. So I would say when I'm looking at a recreational book, I want to tell a story of the account. Like think like Shipper has mentioned this before, but like think about everything you know about the account. Like what ethnicity is the person? Like are you if you're betting? Like how old are you? Where are you living? Like if you in your New York, maybe bet a lot of New York teams if you find value. That's a logical reason for like books to like why you be betting these things. Have a same pattern, and then I think another big thing is in the first week. I think about it as like as for data scientists, you're classifying something like in the first like week or two. I would highly recommend never betting sharp in the first week or two of a new account. Let them classify you as a fish, as a square, and then at that point hit them hard. And then my attitude is once you start betting sharp, then you just never go back. Like that I don't want to like bash Mr. Limited, but that's something I disagree with him about. Like I don't believe in this like you max up you go back and forth. Once they have one bet where okay, this guy might know what he's doing, never go back in my opinion. Just pound it in.
Got it. Yeah, really interesting. But
Full steam ahead.
I
Yeah.
do, I
Love
do,
that.
I do love the local teams thing. So I've mentioned this before, and I'll mention it again. And not everyone watches every single episode, but um, what I typically like to do is make the account look as square and recreational as possible in the early going. Oftentimes, what I'll do when I open an account is I'll have friends that I know are super, pretty square. I'll basically just be like, send me the bets that you like in like a Telegram chat or WhatsApp. And I kind of just go through the betting behaviors that they would, because I know that they're not winners and whatever, right? And it's very clear in the early going that they like to bet the local teams.
Yeah.
Blue Jays, Raptors, Leafs are going to be 60% of the action. Whatever the rationale may be, like I have a feeling about tonight or whatever. Jays can't possibly lose 5 games in a row. The very rec thing. But I mean, that is a very rec thing to do. There's a lot of recs who sign up purely to bet on their own team and make the game a little bit more interesting. I think that's probably one of the best ways you can disguise yourself.
It's something else my partners and I discussed is actually signing up to a service that loses, like a scam service, to get their plays. So I get classified in with a bunch of other. We It's too painful for me to like give a scammer money and then like bet. But I this is something I thought about, just like if a rec book has like hundreds of guys betting the same thing and they all lose, how good does that look on your account
That
if there's the same like moronic parlays? I don't know if that actually would actually work or not, but it's something to think about.
well, that is literally hilarious, bro.
I wonder about that though. I do want to have Shipper on for another episode at some
Like you're
point.
saying, does it ban when everyone's betting the same
Well,
thing at once?
me and Johnny attended a holiday party for a recreational sports book at the end of 2022. And we found our way into the trading room for that sports book. And we were able to very clearly see how they see bets in real time and how they profile in real time based off of multiple people betting the same thing at once.
The trader was also a listener of the pod. So
Yes.
I know there's a lot of
Yes.
traders at these books that listen here.
Oh,
I got a suggestion, by the way, for a book after, but go ahead.
But we know very clearly that they pay attention to the winning services, and if they see so Right Angle Sports, for an example. Now
Yeah.
I know Right Angle Sports had a down year for college basketball, but typically they would have been a respected service in the space, and the traders at that book would be on top of every Right Angle Sports release, and if they saw people betting it at the same time as the release, which a lot of people will bet it later and they don't care about those people because they've already lost 4 points on the college basketball total. But the people who are betting it right away, boom, profiled across the board, right? Limits cut, boom. But I don't know if they're paying attention to the shit services because there's so many.
I don't think they are. I've literally seen a trader do this. Like, oh, Donovan Mitchell's out. They just got steamed. Like review. Send all. I've seen it. So like I know a lot of these guys, like we give them no credit. We're like, these guys are terrible. I think if the book has just like an influx of bets coming in, like you can't really like here's you want a real example for people listening. It's like let's sometimes with betstamp, like we have bets that track. We have like literally millions of bets coming in that people are tracking. You know how impossible people are always asking me like, oh, do you ever like look at the bets people are placing and see like the amount of project that would be to actually do this? Like, sure, we may even be able to build a ticker, which we don't have. It would literally just be flooding with bets the whole time. Like to actually review which bets are sharp would be just such a project. So I do think like when you're at DraftKings, for example, and I'm sure we have like more bets coming in than them because it's tracked and people like track all the bets at the same time. They'll go through and whatnot and draft. And a lot of our bets also aren't necessarily verified bets. People are just tracking random stuff, right. But would be nearly impossible, I think, to just look at a DraftKings trader screen and then from there be like, wow, these guys are automatically Rex or these guys are automatically sharps just from the bets that come. But as soon as you like right click, probably click on the profile and go through, at that point, I feel pretty confident that I'd do a very good job profiling somebody. Yeah. And as would you, I'm sure.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's always comes down to my experience with consulting for sports books in the past.
Oh, couldn't even go one.
But I've lived this before, and I know like the metrics that the books look at in the early going, and you just want to portray yourself as a bad bettor as quickly as possible. There's other ways to do it outside of bets, by the way. Like if you deposit a certain amount and you lose your initial deposit and you have a second deposit day, like very quickly, that's another good way of, portraying yourself as someone that the sports books might think they can extract value out of you in the long run.
Actually, there's something I wanted to mention on that. I think like there's a lot of talk about responsible gaming. Something that I believe is very helpful is shaping your account as much as a problem gambler as possible. Like, and what I mean is like if you like something I like to do is if I deposit a new account, win a bunch, like on like bad stuff like big parlays that are like negative EV and stuff, withdraw that same amount, so I'm playing with the profits, and then or chase losses, like double up, like try the martingale strategy on your account, like look as problem gambler as you possibly can. I mean, look,
Did you
they
ever set
want.
the problem gaming limits on the account?
I did try that once, but that caused more problems than it helps. So I would not recommend that. But like,
Well, I recommend it if you are a problem gamer,
yeah,
but
yeah,
like
yeah,
if you have issues and you struggle with controlling yourself, use the problem gaming. Like I say that seriously. I might have a smirk on my face, but seriously, if you are going to struggle with betting addiction, do use those tools. If you're not going to, then it's a different story.
yeah. Of course, obviously, I'm talking about like winning betters
Winning sports bettors, yeah.
and whatnot. But you know, they want the problem gamblers. Like, I mean, they can say whatever like PR nonsense they want to talk about. That's how they make the money. And if you can look like one as much as possible, your limits are only going to go up. So that's
Yep, that's the whole. I'll win 45K in my account and just put all of it down
yeah,
on one bet.
On the Eagles.
That's
exactly.
that's
Eh,
the massive.
So this is my sports book idea because it stems from that. Like a lot of rec guys, and listen, I don't intend to start my own sports book. I'm happy to put this idea out there, but this is something that I would love to see. Okay, a lot of my buddies they'll bet the Jays every game. Okay, they don't necessarily care about the price to bet the Jays every game.
Yeah, Zach's one of those guys.
This is what I want. You have like an option. They do all these preset bets and everything. They're all garbage, like preset 16 parlay. Like they should do a pre-package home team and you get like some sort of discount. It's like, I want to bet you basically pre-commit before the season. I want to bet $50 base amount on every single Leaf game for the entire season. And then you agree to just get the closing odds and you lock it up front and pay all the money up front. And as a result of doing that, they'll give you like some sort of boosted promo where they'll give you like $500 or something if you do that. And then you just get to sweat on the Leaf game every single game.
That is actually an excellent idea. And if I'm DraftKings, why would I not do that? Like, of
That's
course,
it's a no-brainer.
Dude,
It's a no-brainer. Zach, cut that out. We might. No, I'm just kidding.
that's a pretty solid idea until everyone just shits on it in the comments.
No,
for
that's
reasons that I
that's
can't think about
for,
right now.
for a rec better. Like I know I have at least 10 buddies that would just do that. Like yeah, give me $20 on every single Jays game, and they'll just be willing to accept like maybe obviously if you're going to be adjusting it, it's complicated, but just give them the closing price every time after the game starts.
Yeah,
every
they
Jays
don't
game,
care about price
the
anyways.
bet's in their account.
Yeah,
and it's
great
just like an automated way to do it. You prepay up front for the year. Book's probably happy, hold the money, and it's good. You know what's good for the book? Every win, it'll release the $20 back to your account. So it's like you're depositing a little bit that you can play with. No brainer. You're welcome. It's patent pending.
Much sharper than he looks. Much sharper than he looks. I was in here. Sorry to go completely off topic. I threw Zach under the bus there. Zach's actually a pretty decent better himself nowadays. But I
heard he lost a bunch on the anthem of the Super Bowl. But other than
well, that was because he got some bad placed it at the wrong books, unfortunately. But last week I gave him. I didn't give him I was gifted tickets to Blue Jays game.
It was last week when we were recording.
From the guy that helped us with build this studio, and I couldn't go that night, so I gave them to Zach. And I saw Zach was here, like up to like 15 minutes before the game, and he's hammering away on his computer. I'm like, "What are you doing, Zach?" He's like, "I got all these player prop overs tonight for the Jays. I need these guys to come through with a bunch of hits tonight." I believe they got shut out and like 3 hits total as a team. And I'm like, oh man. I mean, you know what though? I'm like, that is a genius way to prime an account, man. Like just go in, Toronto Blue Jays, bet every single player over on hits to hit a home run every single night. Imagine a trader reviewing that account.
Okay, hold on. One quickly in my defense, it was not all on the Jays. They did get shut out. I had a bunch of stuff on the Jays. But I had a lot of stuff on the White Sox. Yeah, it was White Sox as well. So I ended up losing money because I had a bunch on the Jays and everyone lost. But yeah, I did have that.
But
Yeah.
someone reviewed his account probably at night, and they're like,
They
this is my
they had a note there, producer for Hit the Books, and they're like, this guy's square as can be.
Do you remember the note on your account at that sportsbook I was mentioning earlier?
Yeah. We can't mention it, but there's been some funny stuff I've dealt with in the industry just from as a result of this podcast, basically.
Yes.
Like as a result of this, like getting pre-profiled on stuff. I mean, it's just a risky play. It is what it is. We like doing the podcast. We have fun here, providing value to everybody. I hope if we are, smash that like and subscribe.
Definitely. Road to 10K. We need to get the subs up. So many people watching out there are not subbed. Seriously, over 50% every week. Hit that subscribe button. Want to do a little bit of a personal reflections section here, Chris. Actually, before we do, just out of curiosity, Johnny loves this question. He mentioned it like 5 times on the show. What are your future goals in the betting industry? Like, what do you hope to get out of sports betting?
As much money as possible. Like that. I mean, I started like for the love of sports and a love of gambling, and it's kind of just evolved into a love of money. I just want to win as much as possible, as quickly as possible.
Chris, if you could go back and let's say like get your original accounts from the start, like you're starting over again, you signed up to all the sports books that you can, how would you change what you originally did with those accounts?
Oh, okay. So I would basically exclusively parlay. I want to win, just absolutely bury them. And I think another like thing that's really good about parlays is you either lose like a small or you win a lot. And I'm not talking about like negative parlays, but the reason that's so good is if you keep losing, you're just a fish to these rec books. So you just keep losing. Your limits get bigger and bigger, and eventually, when you win, I mean, you just pound it in. And I like to view every account that I get is what's the max I can win from it, and I want to. How can I get that number to be as big as possible? So if I had my old accounts back, I'd want that number to be, you know, we're talking like 6 figures, if possible. Like that's what I would want, and I'd want to hit a huge one and just keep losing until I would hit a huge one. And that's what I'd want to do.
Keep in mind, guys, for anyone looking to take this advice, you will need a bankroll in order to do this. Like you can't just keep jamming your accounts. Like you have to be responsible. This is absolutely not for people just starting out, or even if you have like, let's say a mid 5-figure bankroll. It's not advice for you. Like you don't want to be growing super risky. If you're above that and you graduated, then I would agree with the advice.
That's fair. And I could also preface this by saying like, um, the max you could win on an account is usually dictated by your bankroll. Like you said, if you have like a $20,000 bankroll, you can't win like $1 million from your DraftKings, like because you just can't bet big enough, and you're gonna need so many bets. So like, I guess a better way to say it I'd want to win a lot more units than possible, and whatever size you're using. Like if you're only betting like $50 a parlay, that's fine. But I still think sizing it down is the way to go. But just be responsible with your sizes.
Yeah, I take it you wouldn't jam 45K on Eagles plus 9.5.
He would do it on a parlay that and the under now.
Exactly. Some player props parlayed in as well. Oh,
I'm not sure which rapper said this, but when you were explaining how much you would like, how you would treat your accounts, this line came to mind. Too much money ain't enough money. That's basically how you were talking there. Like, I just want to hit him as hard as possible. Rob's like, how hard? You're like, harder.
Oh man, that's too good. Do you keep up with like the sports betting landscape? And there's been the conversations with the Massachusetts Gaming Board recently about limiting players. How much of your time is spent on like keeping up with the industry as a whole and trying to, make sure that you're planning your adaptation, so to speak, over time?
Yeah. So it's funny. You referenced me as a professional. So I would actually not consider myself a professional better because I have held a full-time job for the past 3 years. Even though gambling has made
what do you do for work?
Right now I'm a macroeconomic analyst. I just got a new I was planning on quitting, but then I got a new job offer to work for like basically a hedge fund. So
Mm.
it's the same thing as sports betting, except we're gambling on the stock market. So I figured that was
This
a
is
better
an obvious
opportunity.
answer, but people need to hear it. What's easier to beat? Stonks or sports?
Obviously, sports. It's not even close. I it's like people talk about like, oh, I can beat like NFL, like the sickos of NFL. Yeah, they're only taking like two, $300,000. You can chuck 200, 300 million on some of these stocks. Like, and you think you can beat the stock market? Like, get the fuck out of here.
Yeah.
I have arguments with people sometimes where they're like, oh, like Air Canada is a good buy right now. And then I'll be like, okay, like why? Why is
I
Air
love
Canada
this.
a good buy right now? And they'll be like, oh, well, like they just announced that they're doing this and they're buying out this, and then this is gonna happen. And I'm like, first off, and you compare it to sports, right? You're like, okay, what this guy basically is saying to me is that he thinks Air Canada is a good bet at the market price that it's currently at
Yeah.
right now because of news he read from yesterday that Kyrie Irving is in for the series. But really, that news hit the market 3 weeks earlier that Kyrie was in for the service,
Yeah.
in for the
I,
series. That's like the level at which people are
I don't
trying
mean
to
to like,
donk
I'm
stonks.
not trying to bash like Telemachus or anything. I think Telemachus is like much smarter than me. I mean, the dude, I listened to his episode. I'm like, oh my God, like another level. But if you take some like the crushers of the stock market and you put them in the sports betting, they would like blow him out of like it wouldn't even be comparable. Like the top dogs in the sports would be no match for like the sickos of the stock market, like the real geniuses. And people who compare it have no idea what they're talking about.
I think the parallels between sports betting and the stock market speculation are very similar, especially from like the recreational crowd who every like it, it's it's just maybe my own personal experience, but like all my friends who bet and lose on sports also are the ones who put their money in the stock market and lose. And they're just constantly feeding me like the exact same stuff as Johnny. Like, you gotta buy this. Like, this is,
But
and
the
it's
thing is, it's like so much more variance because you're betting so little in this. You're like so little stock trades in the stock market that like most people that you talk to will just say, yeah, I made money in the stock market. Just sheer variance of like being in the market, even though they probably underperformed versus like standard indexes, but they still like have made money in absolute. So they're like, yeah,
Exactly.
I'm a
it's
legend.
I was recently, my sister is 6 years younger than me. I was recently at her place with all of her friends, so a bit of a younger crowd, and they're sharing the different cryptos that they're involved with now, and they're like, "Oh, you got to get in on this, you got to get in on that," and I'm like, Why? Why do I have?" And because it's going to the moon, man. Like, this one is going up, and all these guys are in like 20 different alts. And if they had just put it into Bitcoin or even ETH recently, they're making money, and they think that they're doing something like amazing, like Earth. But if they had just put it into Bitcoin, they would have made like triple the amount that they've made on these shitty alts that they've bought, and they don't even realize they're not even realizing this. Some of this happens with the stock market too. Sports betting, it's all the same. Like there's just so much overlap between all these.
Chris, what'll piss you off more, a stonk tout or a sports betting tout?
That's a good question. Honestly, a sports betting tout, and the only reason that is I think the biggest difference between the two is in general, if you just blind like a monkey throw darts at the stock market, you actually will have a positive ROI, right? Because the stock market does go up. Uh, Now you're probably not going to beat the standard index, but if you follow like a sports tout, you just lost. Like you can't win. Like you lost your bets and you had to pay him. Where like with this the stock tout, like you have a better shot, and he might actually be good just because he's actually operating in like a plus EV overall environment
Mm.
because the general market does go up over time.
Chris, you've been very gracious with your time. Before we get into our final questions here, do you have any funny or interesting anecdotes from your betting journey that you would maybe like to share with the audience that we haven't asked you about today?
I kind of think I covered like mostly everything. Um, yeah, I guess that's pretty much it. I think I've covered everything.
All right, perfect. Plus EV, minus EV. I take it.
I got one thing to mention actually. So somebody sent me in something. They're like, hey, I think it'd be a super cool idea for the podcast if you guys like talked about like a full episode where you had just given out old edges that are now like fully new. And he gave me one to give out on here, so I just pulled that up. It was like he reached out a couple months back, but I figured this is the episode we've given out a bunch. I'm gonna give out his. Said it was good for the air, but he said, I don't know if it was him or someone in a group, but a crazy cool edge he had, and this one's really awesome, was correlated parlays where he would basically parlay NASCAR matchups, but you could parlay the same guy to win versus like 5 to 6 opponents. So let's say you had Ryan Blaney versus like Truex, and then Ryan Blaney versus Hamlin, Blaney versus Kyle Busch. And then you'd be able to, I don't know if you could parlay that also with like Blaney to win, but if you could just even parlay those 6, essentially all you need is Ryan Blaney to win that race, maybe fair odds plus 1,000, and you're probably getting somewhere in like, crazy,
a much higher payout.
Plus, you don't even really need a win. You just need him to win his matchup.
Yeah.
So, thank you, Tim, for sending that one in. Appreciate that. I know we chatted a while back. We will hope to do an episode on that. I think that could be cool. We'll maybe get some ones from the community. If you want to email them in, you can email. What is the email we're using right now? Circles off at thehammer.bet.
Yes.
Circles off at thehammer.bet. If you have any like nuked edges, we wouldn't want you to give away anything that you still play or anything right now. But you know what I think you could also do would be interesting ground for a lot of like sharps in the community, guys like us, to actually think about these old edges, and then maybe something pops, like light bulb moment where you're like, you know what? If I take this, turn it to this, something I can do on this book, maybe we all make $1 bazillion.
There's actually been a lot of times too where people think that an edge is completely nuked because they've exhausted all of their outs, and it actually still exists elsewhere. It's happened before where somebody's like, this used to be a thing, it's no longer there, and they operate in some US state that has like 4 sports books.
And you can still do that at like 10 more books.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm going to go quickly before this airs. Try that NASCAR edge for the Indy 600.
I actually think that might have been available at the in-person kiosk, because when I was betting all my stuff, I mentioned it to like a poker friend of mine because he would help me get down. And I was like, you should look some of the stuff. And he mentioned something about NASCAR, but I didn't know much about NASCAR at the time. And that might have been the same thing, but it's definitely Dusto at this point.
I did just say Indy 600 was NASCAR. Indy 600 is IndyCar racing. NASCAR's a different thing. Nobody kill me, please. I'm sorry. I don't watch NASCAR.
This is the guy that's going to build an F1 car.
Yeah, I will. All right. I know a couple of drivers in NASCAR, but other than that, I'm not a big, I don't even know how people watch. There was a NASCAR event last week. I was following it because I had a couple bets, and no joke, it started at like 6 p.m. I checked back at like 9:30 to see the results, to see if I won any bets, and maybe there was a delay or something. They were still on like lap 240 of like 400. I'm like, are these guys just sitting there for 6 hours?
Dude, when I used to play DFS back in the day, I knew nothing about NASCAR, but there used to be a huge edge in NASCAR DFS because so many people just didn't understand the scoring system, which, primarily you want to take guys that are going to start very low on the grid that are going to finish higher up, because there's if a guy starts 40th and finishes 12th, that's worth more than a guy who starts second and wins the race. So there was an edge to be had for years, but I'll never forget. I can't even tell you what race it is, I'm not a NASCAR fan, but I was winning a GPP, which I think would have paid $180K, which is substantial money for me at that time. It's still a substantial win, no matter how you cut it. $180K is something, but Kevin Harvick pitted, and on his way out of the pit, hit some debris and got a flat, and had to go all the way around the track. So I watched the DraftKings currently winning $180K solo first go down to $0 very quickly. And I'm like, I'm never watching a NASCAR race again in my life. And I haven't. I've just completely given up on NASCAR after that. But
so we'll get into our closing question.
No, we didn't do plus EV minus
Well,
EV.
that was what I was actually.
Oh, you were not going to.
One of our closing questions. Give us a plus EV or minus EV move of the week.
So I got a serious one and a less serious one. My friend Clarence just mentioned he wanted me to say Yannick Sinner is an absolute lock to win the French Open. Any price is good. He's a lock. So that would be my plus EV. You can just
Damn,
figure
it's
out
not
that's
gonna
the
it's
less.
not gonna air in time.
Is it? Well,
Oh.
this is not going to air in time.
No.
Right? Well, you know what? It doesn't matter.
Yeah, no, it'll be even better if he wins it
If
now.
he wins and this airs
All right,
after-
if he wins it, keep it in. If he doesn't,
Okay,
cut it out.
done.
Um, and then another one that this one might be the less serious one, or the other one was, um, you mentioned something. Someone else mentioned this before, but I got this from a poker friend of mine. When you go to a restaurant, as soon as you get your food, ask to close it, like to pay right there. Nothing is more tilting when you finish eating and the waiter or waitress is walking around. You can't find them. You're sitting there for like 5 minutes. Just pay then, and then you can leave as soon as you're done eating. Saves so much time.
I've used that before. It's a super EV move.
Yeah.
Super.
There is honestly top 5 tilting experience in life is waiting for your bill and like trying to get the attention of like, especially on a busy night. Love that move, by the way. Love that move. I'm going to continue with the food related.
I have one food related as well. So
Okay.
we're good.
So last week I talked about the hot food, right? Like, listen, you get hot food, you don't want to burn the top of your mouth. You just wait for it to cool off a little bit. It sucks. Almost as bad, maybe actually even worse than that. This is a real first world problem here. Sharp bread. Okay.
What?
I don't know if you've ever went and you're picking out like a sandwich you're going to eat for
You're
lunch.
Italian. There's no sharp bread in America.
That you maybe or maybe not.
It's only paninos, bro.
You have to be very particular about the bread that you use for sandwiches. There are some that are constructed that at the top of them, you just bite into them and they just immediately crack the roof of your mouth wide open. This happened to me a few days ago. I don't want it to happen to anyone else. So avoid, I know this sounds ridiculous, but it's bothering me a lot. It's bothering me a lot to the point where it even hurts to drink coffee. Avoid sharp bread. Like,
that's hilarious.
Really take into account the bread as much as the ingredients in the sandwich.
I think they just have
extremely
Wonder
important.
Bread sandwiches in the States.
You know what?
Wonder Bread, a sponsor of NASCAR that we just mentioned. I don't know if they are really, or if it was just the sponsor of Ricky Bobby in the movie, but
yeah, if you're gonna go to Little Italy, wherever you're located, New York, Boston, or whatever, and you're gonna order a sandwich at the local deli, just be very careful about which bread is on that. You might even want to ask to see the bread first to avoid the ones that are a little bit harder and have a sharpness to them at the top.
So this my plus EV move of the week. It's a send in from a friend here that I received. He says, simple rule now with all this craziness about people demanding tips in the restaurant industry. If you're standing up to order, absolutely no tip. If you're sitting down to order, you tip. That's a plus EV move. I heard it. I thought, I'm like, you know what? Sure, I'll say that one on the pod. Not bad.
These I'm not cheap by any stretch of the imagination. Honestly, I would say that I classify myself as a good tipper. But
You
these
tip
things,
at Starbucks when you go.
it depends on whether or not I'm greeted with a smile. If the cup is in the right place, sometimes on the app, I'll put like picking up in store and they put it at the drive-through. Like, I'm not going to give it. Because then I have to ask somebody. This sounds ridiculous, but there's a process to it all. The tipping on the machines now is absurd, dude. Like, it's gone out of, I don't mind leaving a tip. When 10% tip on something where somebody just prepared it for you and it's ready to go, sure. But don't give the minimum option on the machine as like 20%. We're getting out of, and I understand a lot of people work jobs where they get paid, minimum wage and they're reliant on tips, and that's fine. And that's why we'll do it. But there are some cases, like you go to a baseball game and you order a beer and it's a tall can and they crack open the beer for you and give it to you. I'm sorry, Like, that's not worth a 20% tip on the machine. It's not. Like, I don't want to be that guy, but if you gave me an option of 10% that was like a stand on there, I would probably hit that and be like, all right, fine, whatever. Sorry,
How
I've
do you
ranted too.
decide that what that's worth 10% but not 20%? Like, what's your thought process there?
There is not one other than I feel like it's an act of service. It probably should be rewarded in some capacity, especially if the beer's cold and they've kept it cold. But yeah, I don't know. It's getting ridiculous now. Like the machines themselves I don't know how it is in the US, by the way. It's very different way stuff works in Canada and the US when you're paying for stuff. But typically speaking, they'll serve you up a machine for your credit card, and there's some standardized tip percentages. Yeah. And they used to be like 10%, 15%, 18%. And now it's like 20%,
22, 28.
Yeah, it's
maybe that's just here in Canada, but no, it's crazy. I'm like I'd say as well, I do value tipping people. I like to tip a lot on Uber Eats, especially if like someone's coming in, going up an elevator, finding the floor. I tip a lot. My tips vary completely based on the level of service I get. I'm a true believer in that.
I do have a plus CV on the tipping. Whenever I was like hitting the kiosk, I would always tip the cashier. Like the cashier is like big, which is very plus EV in my opinion. And it actually paid out once or twice where I cashed in like a duplicate bet that I had bet. And I'd always tip this cashier like a lot. And he mentioned, by the way, they're trying to crack down on this. You shouldn't do that so often. And he's still paying out the bet. And I'm like, thanks, man. I appreciate.
Well, what do you mean cashing a? Like two bets of the same.
Two bets, anonymous bets on a kiosk to
same
circumvent
bet.
limits.
Yeah. No,
I'm glad to hear someone tips in those situations, because I know for a fact that good friend Uncle K, Joey Kanish, does not, based off of his previous Twitter pictures where he's always got a perfect dollar amount. You notice, like he cashes out exactly 500, and it's $500 bills. You can tell right away when somebody has given a little tip or not based off of those pictures. But it's good. Listen, it's good to give back. I don't want to be an asshole here. I am by nature maybe an asshole, but it's a little bit out of hand now. Like for services, it's very small services that I will give a small tip, but it's
dude, when they start asking for tips in the drive-through now, it's getting a little ridiculous. Like
it's getting out of hand. I understand inflation. It's things are going on, but we gotta get back rooted in reality at some point or another.
All right, back. Sorry to bring up that negativity on the show. Actually, all right, Chris. So you mentioned earlier you're 25 years old, just a brisk 25. If you could go back 5 years to when you were 20 years old, probably still at school in Virginia Tech. Or yes, probably at Virginia Tech.
Still a Hokie.
Yes.
What advice would you give to yourself?
First advice would be like, don't bet under 20. I would never do anything that ridiculous. Like never, ever would I ever dream of betting under 21. So wait till 21 to bet. That'd be my first advice, of course.
Of course. That goes without saying.
Yes. But some advice I would give myself is have more confidence in a sports betting tip. Have more confidence in edges you find and edges you see. Like you don't have to double check so often. Like an example I would give is like a futures edge I found is like last year it was like total wins in division, and it was like Steelers under 3 plus 130. And I actually like went back and like checked to like all the math to make sure it was like good, and like, just apply some like common sense. Like they're the worst team in the division, the median win total, and you're getting plus money. Like, and you're competing against like a random trader that posted these numbers up. You don't need to like think about it. Just like have confidence. And the reason that's so important is these lines move fast. Like if these big edges pop out, you got to hit it. You got to hit it hard. So have confidence in your numbers. Don't spend so much time like checking in the obvious stuff.
Yeah. Good advice.
It's very true. I'll add one thing. Like I've been betting player props for a long time, very successfully for essentially almost my whole life. whole betting life. And the reality is, I have so much data now stored personally, just from like even from betstamp, from everything. Like the amount which I have is more than probably anybody in the space right now for player props. If you told me I had to make numbers for all these player props and win consistently against like sharp bettors, like I would lose. And I'm saying this as like, let's say I worked for a regulated bookmaker and I was just tasked with making the player prop numbers. I would do a significantly better job than they currently do right now, but I would still lose to sharp bettors without a doubt. And when you realize that to like book that breadth of a menu requires, I brought up earlier in the episode, like imagine a screen coming through of like, just countless bets per second. There are going to be some errors. Like even the smartest people, it's going to be very hard to do to actually beat. So I agree with Chris there. Like if you think you have an edge on something, and maybe it's like a future, maybe it's a division winner or something like that. Like a lot of times we've gotten almost too far one way where like people are like, oh, the market is everything and you need to just follow the market and just follow Pinnacle and use it as the North Star. That like, we got to realize there are like exceptions that come in, and mostly on like futures and alt stuff and alt player props and stuff like that. Like to think that the book is going to correctly price every single guy to get a triple double is just insane. Yeah. And especially if you're hitting like openers or in the morning, like there's going to be a ton of edges in there that you should be able to do by just like watching the games and, learning yourself. So I'd agree with Chris in that sense. Like if you think you have something, like, be more confident sometimes and be responsible with it, but you can go sometimes.
Well said. His name is Chris Dierkes. You can follow him on Twitter at FlupNoLied, which was poker handle back in the day, which I found out off air. We'll post that down in the description of below. For those of you who do want to follow him, I do recommend that you do so. Of course, I do recommend that you smash the like button down below. Make sure you're subbed here to Circles Off. Appreciate everyone who tuned in this week. We'll be back next week for another big episode. This has been Circles Off here on the Hammer Betting Network, presented by Pinnacle Sportsbook.